Coming to you live from a dungeon where there are dragons. And Rick is, of course, the DM. And we're talking about Interdimensional RSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty versus D&D podcast.
Hello, everybody. I'm Travis.
Hey, everybody. I am Brandon.
And welcome to another episode of Interdimensional RSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast / D&D podcast. Not for this episode. For this episode, all in D&D. We're gonna add the metadata so that we hit those search results for Dungeons and Dragons. This is a launching point for us into a whole new demo.
I really should figure out that metadata thing. I think our metadata is included in the MP3 when we upload it to Blueberry, but now I'm not so sure anymore. And this is after 5 years of podcasting. So
and after winning countless awards
That's right.
for podcasting, which we'll get to a little bit later. But thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Welcome to the show where we talk about Rick and Morty. Yes, that's right. We talk about Rick and Morty even when Rick and Morty is not on the air, and we find things to talk about. So we're so thankful that you're here and you're listening to this episode, and hopefully you'll find this episode interesting. How you doing, Brandon? Are you good? I'm gonna go out on a limb and say you're doing pretty good.
I'm feeling pretty good. I went to California. I was a pallbearer for my aunt's funeral. I feel good about that.
Feeling pretty good.
Feeling pretty good. Pretty good. There was at one point in time in the funeral, we're like right about to start the service, and we're like wheeling the casket to the front of the church. Before that, I made a joke to my older brother, who was a pallbearer in front of me, about something. It was inappropriate, didn't matter. And I was like, why isn't Tim laughing? He's not laughing at this joke of mine. And he's like, Dad's crying. I'm like, well, don't stare at him. Listen to my joke, asshole. Anyway, so that was that. So that's good. But more importantly,
way to deal with those emotions, Brandon.
But more importantly, I'm feeling good. We'll talk about this more in semi-pertinent news. But yeah, I'm pretty stoked. I'm pretty stoked that I'm a co-podcaster with you. We do good stuff together. So
we do great stuff. And if you enjoy the stuff that we do and you want to follow along on social media, there are just numerous ways that you can tag along and join along with Unity in this collection of positive fandom. First way you can do that is head over to Twitter at Rick and Morty Pod. You can also go out to the Reddits. Rick and Morty podcast.reddit.com is our subreddit, or you can go to rickandmorty.reddit.com to find some of our episodes featured on that subreddit. If you're into Instagram, you can go to Rick and Morty Podcast to follow the some no context Rick and Morty images, things like that over there. And you can also go to rickandmortypod.com, the website, to get all of these episodes. Facebook.com/Rick and Morty Podcast. And of course, you can send us an email at rickandmortypodcast@gmail.com. That's all the contacts. You could also head over to that virtual tip jar, the patreon.com/Rick and Morty Pod. If you enjoy the show and want to throw a few dollars our way, you could support the show monetarily on Patreon.
Or if you don't want to go through Patreon, you can always send it directly to us. If you search on PayPal at stevetheheb@gmail.com.
Are you just gonna have people PayPal you money?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean that. I mean, I should do an official show PayPal money, but I mean that's. I mean, it's virtual. It's a virtual tip jar. Do you support me?
Yeah. Also, if you want to go to my Amazon wish list and buy me some stuff, I'll post that in the show notes. I don't know what we're doing here, Brandon.
We should post our Amazon. Well, I mean, that's where the money goes. It doesn't matter. Whatever, man. You can make fun of me all you want.
You want to circumvent Patreon and just put it right in my PayPal account. You go right ahead.
I do also want to say, switching gears, I haven't put a lot of those no context ones lately in the last maybe week and a half because there were issues with Instagram, and so did a little pause on that, but we'll get back into it if
Yeah,
you're interested in seeing static screenshots with no context whatsoever, except the hashtag no context.
they're out there. You can find them for sure.
Hmm.
All right. Without any further ado, let's head into our very first segment, which is always semi-pertinent news.
Semi pertinent news. News in the way that you moves the grooves. You got the semi pertinent news. Growing up from the ground, reaching up to the sky and saying, howdy do to you. Howdy do to you.
we're playing it loose on this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, some like weird Tom Waits like stuff happening there at the end. All right. Anyway, first up in semi-pertinent news, it is very much podcast related and not Rick and Morty related. But hey, we won a thing.
Yeah, we did.
Some of you may recall that we entered a contest, the My Roadcast contest, put out by Rode Microphones. We made an original 2-minute podcast called Nursery Crimes, and results came out today, just a few hours ago, and we were the runners-up. Is that correct? Are we the runner-ups? Runners-up. I think we are the runners-up.
Runners up, yeah, runners up, yeah. We absolutely, we were the runners up, and just to give you the background again, Jesse Permenter hit us up on email before the competition started, and he was like, "Hey, I think you guys should do this." We got it, and as I and tend to do, I say, "Travis, we should do this," and then we end up doing it, and then Travis comes back after I've been away from the phone for a while, and he's like, "Here's all my ideas. Let's do it." 3 hours later, we have a 2-minute podcast.
That is the craziest thing to me about this whole situation is like I was sitting on my couch not doing anything, and you're like, "Hey, I know I mentioned this thing like a week ago, but do you want to work on this podcast?" And I'd already blown you off once about it, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing anything. Let's come up with some ideas." And I think it was realizing that it was like a 2-minute thing, and for me that challenge, like the constraint of building a podcast in 2 minutes, was a really exciting sort of challenge for me. So we threw a bunch of ideas together. We wanted to sort of parody some other podcasts, especially genres that we don't really produce ourselves. We deal with a lot of pop culture type stuff, but there are tons of true crime podcasts and things like that where that has a huge following. And so I thought it would be fun to do something like that. And apparently it worked because we won us some prizes. And a huge thank you to everybody that suggested or encouraged us along the way. If you went out and voted for our podcast, we did not win the People's Choice, but we still thank you so much for going out and supporting the podcast and supporting Brandon and I. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Shout out to So Lucid, who thank you for voting, but your vote didn't matter. And I know that that's how you feel about voting in general. So this just goes to prove your point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Don't forget to vote, kids. 2020 is right on the corner. Anyway, so hopefully we'll get some new gear and maybe the show will sound slightly better. No promises on that, but we'll be getting some new stuff. So thanks a lot to Rode and everybody involved. Let's move on to some other news. I mean, there isn't much, but there was a tweet from Justin Roiland last week that pretty much said that the season 4 eps are feeling pretty great, which isn't a release date, isn't any sort of real news other than the fact that we know they're making them, which we have known, and that at least Justin Roiland's pretty happy about them. So I don't know. They're just stringing us along, but
some people have said, well, of course he's got to say they're good. It's his show. But I would argue, I would posit that he wouldn't say anything if he didn't think the quality was there.
Yeah. It's not something like if we turn out a real stinker of a podcast in 1 week, we're not going to turn around and be like, "Whoo, this episode's pretty great."
Unity, you're gonna look forward to this one.
This one's particularly good. Brandon drinks too much and passes out halfway through. It's a real doozy.
Has not happened yet. There's only been like 1 or 2 episodes where I actually got drunk, and and I'm like audibly slurring towards the end of it.
Hey, there's always opportunities to do bigger and better things, Brandon. Let's not rule anything out.
The next up, this is something we said we were going to talk about on Twitter a little bit, and I just threw it in the show notes right now, so Travis would see it. But maybe a month ago or so, maybe a month, 2 months ago. When was the last time we did the show? It doesn't matter.
It's been within a month.
Okay.
It's a few weeks ago. Yeah.
College Humor, they posted a a video entitled "Stop Ruining Rick and Morty," and um I have to correct the spelling of that in the show notes. Not "Stop Running Rick and Morty."
Yeah, it's not a direct attack at Justin and Dan to stop running the show.
Stop running show. Stop ruining Rick and Morty. And the whole skit is they're in a therapist's office, and it's Rick and Morty embodied, personified with a toxic fan.
Yeah, he's like in like a morph suit with all black with just Rick and Morty printed on the front. Yeah. And then there's a toxic fan on the therapy couch right next to him.
And so a few folks wanted us to talk about it, and I do want to talk about it. Specifically, we can just boil it down to the therapist is saying just break up, just break up with a toxic fan. And
I think one of the big things with this particular toxic fan is it's the breed of toxic fan that thinks they're better than anyone else, or that they understand Rick and Morty better than anyone else, which right. I'm gonna really try not to be guilty of, just by virtue
by nature
of the fact
that we do the show.
We do the show. I think there are a lot of fans that prove week in and week out that they're much bigger and smarter fans of the show than I am. And they prove that when they send us corrections and things that we screw up on this podcast.
They don't send us corrections. We never get corrected.
Yeah.
Do they send you corrections?
Yeah, they send them personally to me. They don't want to damage your frail ego, so they send them to my DMs exclusively.
You know my email address because you can PayPal it. It's stevethehead@gmail.com.
Yeah.
So yeah, the folks who I feel came out more so when season 3 began, and here's the thing: there are so many of us who are huge fans of the show that when people are talking about how we can't stand Rick and Morty fans, they're not talking about you, right? They're not talking about the I did point to Travis. They're not talking about the majority of us, right? They're talking about the ones who acted like idiots, and they always use the guy who jumped on top of the counter for Szechuan sauce as a prime example. And even though I thought it was funny, I know how obnoxious that also is. So, but the key point at the end of that video, and maybe this is a kind of it's not a spoiler necessarily, but the therapist, eventually the fan walks out, and he's just talking to Rick and Morty personified. And he says, "Hey, I mean, I'm a fan of the show. I just don't like saying it out loud."
Yeah. He says, I don't always admit that I'm a fan because I don't want to be associated with that guy, which is the toxic fan, right? And I could relate to that, I guess, a little bit, especially, you look at the wall behind me if you're watching on stream, or, the countless Rick and Morty t-shirts, and even my office at work has tons of like Rick and Morty stuff up in it. And it would be very easy for someone to walk in and assume that I'm this like toxic, rude person, because there have been so many examples throughout the fan base of people that act that way. And I would hope to provide an alternative to that and actually show a more positive spin on the fan base. And I don't think that we're like beyond the possibility of winning it back. I understand that it's a tough road, and almost the meme of fans criticizing the creators and being entitled and like expecting the show. That to me is one of the hardest parts of the fandom is the people that I always see commenting anytime Dan Harmon posts something on Instagram, anytime
For
Justin
season
Roiland
4.
tweets something.
Finish season 4.
Shut up and go work on season 4. Where's season 4 right now? And like they're doing it, like it's happening, but it doesn't. They don't like sneeze out an episode and it's perfect and it's just there for you to watch. Like it takes work. And the reason we love the show, the reason that it's so great, is because they take the time and they do the work to make it good. And so to rush it or be like, I expect it now. I'm hoping that I'm hoping half of the people are like, it's a bit. I just want to be the one that says it on this post. But, Dan Harmon talks about it all the time. Like, he quit Twitter because it's just all he hears is toxic fans talking crap to him. So, I don't know. Go out and post a positive comment today. We will now get 8 toxic comments on this show.
As an example of that, so on Facebook there was they're talking about how comedy and games hosted by Justin Roiland of Squanch Games at PAX, right, on on this coming Thursday on the 28th. And the comments on it, there's somebody asked him when he was getting his ass working on season 4 of Rick and Morty. Somebody else says, here we are sitting without a season 4 and this fucker's off milking the next cash cow. And then the third one is, do your work on Rick and Morty, god damned. And you're like, they are. He doesn't do the animation.
Yeah, trust me, if Roiland was drawing it, it would look way worse. Just look at Doc and Marty if you want proof of that.
Bushworld Adventures. Let's get more of that. Which, by the way, I hope that's a April Fool's thing.
April Fool's is right around the corner. So go back and listen to the Jimmy Neutron episode of this podcast, which was a delight. All right. Anything else to say about this video, Brandon?
No, we'll have a link. We'll have a link in the comments, or you can go to YouTube, search for College Humor. Stop ruining Rick and Morty. On the subject of they're drawing it, recently over on Instagram, Harmon responded to a comment, and I just had it on my Slack. Let me get it back again. Somebody yelled at him, "Where's Rick and Morty's new season? Sad face, sad face, sad face." And he wrote, "Hello, let's do an experiment. Get a stopwatch. Write, a man eats a sandwich on a piece of paper. Write that time down. Now, draw a man eating a sandwich. Now, divide the time it took to write by the time it took to draw. You'll get a number less than 1 with a dot in front of it. Move the dot 2 places right. Now you have the percentage chance that the answer is they're drawing it."
They're
drawing it.
Cartoons work. First you write them, then you draw them. Yeah, they're drawing it.
That's it. They're drawing.
Yeah. And guys,
that wasn't the social media minute, by the way.
That doesn't count. Doesn't count because I still have one. 70 episodes. They are going to be consistently working on the show for 70 episodes. So by the end of the 3rd or like the 6th season from now, we're gonna just be like, yeah, we need a break. We've got so much great Rick and Morty. We need a summer off.
Give us a break.
Yeah. It's time for the Dan Harmon social media minute.
Oh, setting up the backdrop music for you. Oh. Now do it.
Social media. Yep. That's it. You set me up so perfectly. All right. This week we'll talk again about Instagram because that's pretty much the only social media Dan Harmon uses. And this post, it's actually the most recent one as of this recording, comes to us courtesy of Miss Cody Heller, Dan Harmon's fiancée, which he reposted on his personal Instagram page. But I like to call it sleep rapping. And this is a video. It's there's almost no visuals whatsoever because it's dark. It's the middle of the night. Thank goodness Cody had the gumption to grab her phone and start recording Dan Harmon rapping in his sleep. He is laying down some tracks, spitting those lyrics, and then she asks him if he's awake, and then there's a very awkward conversation where he is sort of awake and sort of still asleep, talking about whatever it was he was dreaming about, and still sort of rapping at the same time. It's the true mark of a genius. And so make sure to go and check out Dan Harmon, natural rapper, raps in his sleep.
Well, that's great, Travis. This is great, and I can't wait to go look that up and grab the audio and not have it in this episode. Well, we are 22 minutes into this episode. We had a lot of semi-pertinent news, which makes sense because there's not a lot of currently pertinent news for for Rick and Morty. But you know, we do have something that we want to talk about today.
Yeah.
And
so let's talk about it in the main thing.
In the main thing, main thing, main thing, main thing, main thing, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, main thing, Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, and Morty and Morty.
All right, so we have officially run out of episodes to talk about, and for so long we have hinted at the idea of talking about them comics, and we are going to start not from the beginning of the comics, but instead from some of the most recent releases in the Rick and Morty comics world.
Specifically, manageable chunks.
Manageable, for sure.
Progressive iteration.
We discussed in our last episode in Semi-Pertinent News about the release of the trade paperback for Rick and Morty vs. Dungeons & Dragons. And it's not just paperbacks. They released it in hardcover as well. We both picked up our copies, last week?
Last week, yeah. I was I don't know if I told you this, but my aunt died and her funeral was then. And as
Were
I was
you in
flying,
California by chance?
I was, yeah. Oh my God, you know the story.
Yeah,
As
I do listen, Brandon.
I was like, and I was flying out of LAX at 1 a.m, and I thought, I really should pick up this book before I get on the plane, so I have something to read. And so I forced my parents to drive me to find a GameStop that had it.
Oh jeez.
The hardcover, and so I have it. That's that whole story. But let's talk about the actual comic. Not my my aunt's dead, Travis. You can't bring her back.
Okay. I'm sorry, Brandon.
All right. So, by the way, everyone, I joke about this. Look, I'm okay. Like, I love my aunt, and she's gone. You know, don't stop sending me sympathy cards. That's all I'm saying.
This is getting so dark, Brandon. Yeah. So published by IDW. This was the first set of Rick and Morty comics that I've read pretty much since the first trade paperback. I have not been keeping up with my Rick and Morty comics, but there's a lot of partners involved in this. So obviously IDW, Adult Swim, Oni Press, and Wizards of the Coast all came together to make this happen, and I gotta say, it is spectacular. I really enjoyed looking through this. I picked mine up, the GameStop hardcover, and the reason I went out and specifically went to a GameStop and made sure that I got it there is because this is the version that contains a game mod at the back of it, so you can actually play your own D&D campaign or at least a small adventure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the segment. But what were you were reading some of these stories as they were released in individual issues, correct?
Yeah, I collected all 4 originally. With
because you think you're better than me.
Because have so much disposable income. I'm like, I'm gonna buy things that I don't actually read. Uh, Hashtag Oblivion Song. Hashtag Gideon Falls. Um, and so I read the first two issues and then got 3 and 4, but then for some reason I didn't read those two. Um, and what I noticed and just right off the bat with the first two issues was just how good they were at tying together why Rick and Morty would be adventuring or doing anything in a Dungeons and Dragons universe, or how they would tie the two together. And they did it so seamlessly and I, responsibly. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't feel completely ham-fisted. It and I don't know if this is just hitting at like the right time in my life either, but
Yeah.
I am definitely seeing a resurgence of D&D and an increase in the popularity of it to where in a number of circles around me there are a lot of people talking about D&D and playing D&D, and you know, we're starting to play it for the first time, and so for Morty to experience that very early in this book and trying to figure out what D&D is and learn about it, yeah, it really hit home. Like I was like, yeah, I get some. Now obviously I'm not trying to learn D&D to impress a girl. I've already married someone who thinks I'm a nerd because I play D&D. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's not really in the cards for me.
Yeah, here's what I really like about the comic, and it's um it 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 finds a way to show that the cool people play it and the nerdy people play it, and everyone in between uh plays this game, can play this game, can enjoy the game, and find something that they need out of it. And I think it's because of D&D as far as story goes, it's more of an adult kind of experience than I would say Rick and Morty is by itself necessarily, right? Like
Okay.
you can have an immature humor in Rick and Morty and be like, oh yeah, Rick just killed somebody, or Rick turned into a pickle, and it's absurd, right? Whereas D&D has a certain level of yeah, you can mess around in it, but it's still steeped in this fantasy lore where there are gigantic dragons and a guy named a drug or a crime lord named Xanathar who
Yeah.
runs things, right?
Yeah, you're gonna play some weird like offshoot of D&D where like you got some guitar slinging bard ordering sandwiches and stuff like that. That's not. Oh, sorry, spoilers for our
That's
D&D
loot.
campaign. Oh, it is a loot. Yeah, that's right.
It
You're
has a
player.
delicious sandwich. Well, I've had better.
Oh,
Um,
all right.
but you know, but still, even so, it's there's still a more seriousness to D&D than Rick and Morty is
Sure, I think it could,
in and
and
of itself.
I think another thing that this comic does a good job of talking about is, they walk through all like the history of D&D. Like they
Yeah.
once Morty goes and talks to Rick and said and he's very embarrassed, like, hey, maybe can you like make me like have some special knowledge about D&D so I can go impress this girl. And as soon as he definitely thinks Rick is gonna like make fun of him or something, and Rick is just super excited that Morty is interested and wants to play D&D. And so then they go on this journey through a little bit of like the history of D&D. The first game that he plays is like a
Couple of editions.
a first edition with a bunch of old dudes, and Morty like dies numerous times and just isn't super into it. And then as the issues progress, they kind of walk through more of a 2E or a 3E. And they do that through different ways. They go to Blips and Chits and have like a simulated D&D campaign, and there's a lot of ways that they draw the elements of D&D into a Rick and Morty environment, which I think is again done very well, and for the most part isn't forced most of the time. I think most of the time the execution is really well done as well.
Yeah, they do a really well job, a great job of tying the two properties IPs together. So we didn't really say what the story is, but at its core is Morty goes to a comic store, sees a cute girl, and she invites him to a D&D session, and he of course is like, yeah, of course I play. um, which forces him to then go to Rick and say, "Hey, I need your help. I need to figure out how to play this game." And it's kind of a surprise to him and to the reader when you're first reading that Rick is like, "Oh yeah, let's do this. I've been waiting for you to say this to me for a long time."
Yeah.
Um, and that it gets into kind of a theme throughout the series, more in issue 3 and 4 about like cool people play, nerdy people play, and it's just you can have a good time in it, and it's there to help you be somebody who you're not in the normal world.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting the way that they are able to juxtapose, I think. Jerry later on joins the group, and there is a campaign that has the core family, the Smith family, and Rick going through a campaign together. And Jerry is this sorcerer who has a very high charisma score, and he's very familiar with the rules of D&D, which helps him to help Morty learn the game, but also like
Teach them
flex,
lessons.
yeah, teach them lessons, and he's very much not what we would maybe categorize as a typical Jerry on the show.
Yeah.
Which is good to see. And I think I really love Jerry, and I'm gonna say it, the wisdom that Jerry brings into this environment. And you look at Rick, who in that same area refuses to play a bard because he thinks they're useless and they can't fight very well, and he's stuck being a bard, and he just completely checks out, and he doesn't, this Rick, who is this guy that can always be counted on to, save the day or think his way out of a situation, and is always 2 steps ahead of whatever they're facing. He refuses to be involved because he's this bard and he doesn't want to do it. So
Right.
I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. I dare I say it, for those who haven't read the comic, you're interested in reading it. I don't want to spoil anything, but there are some really good lines in this. Um, but I will say that this gets at the root of who Jerry is so much. This is the best Jerry story, and in Rick and Morty Presents Jerry just came out, which is it's a decent read as well. But this Rick and Morty D&D issues 3 and 4 is the ideal and perfect story for Jerry, in my opinion, so far. It we it's some it, we've alluded to it in the course of the conversation, talking about season 1, season 2, season 3, about how he's a good guy, he's just an idiot. Right, he wants to do what's
Yeah,
best for
yeah,
everybody.
right.
He's unable to communicate that effectively or competently, and he isn't like that in this series.
Yeah, yeah. And to be fair, to his credit, most of the time Jerry is not present in the series until they are in the game, and he is playing as his character. And it's really interesting that last act, that last issue of this series, where the characters are playing their characters, I guess. Like, so Morty is not being Morty. Morty is being his rogue character that he rolls. Keth, Keth Silverson.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then you have Summer, who is playing Ari Strongbow, the Ranger. Uh, Jerry's wizard is Kerr Bravian, and Leanne Armor Armoranthia. That's Beth's 6th level cleric, and then G Willikers Petalbutt, the 4th level bard, played by Rick. Yeah, so like they embody those other characters and really play them out, which is interesting to see too, because then you're seeing the characters not in their conventional roles as you've seen them in that dynamic, and it creates some interesting interactions.
Yeah, yeah. So I do want to say one line, and I wrote it down. I don't think this gives away anything that we don't already know about him. You see the line right there in the show notes, Travis. You can confirm whether or not I should say it out loud or not.
Go for it.
Okay. A-OK. He gives me the A-OK. I think that's flipping me off in a different culture. Uh, Jerry says this. He says to Morty. Morty's just asking about Rick, and Jerry in his ultimate wizard form with this high charisma says, it's not that I'm not good at caring for people, but Rick, he isn't good at caring about them. And like when I read that, I was like, God, look at Jerry. Look at
Jerry.
uh
Just dropping some wisdom bombs in
drop
here.
dropping it. Patrick Rothfuss and Jim Zub wrote the series, and they I can't emphasize enough just how well the writing is. They did a great job.
Yeah, it's terrific. And if you are a D&D fan, if you're a fan of both things, if you listen to the show for Rick and Morty, but you also happen to be a D&D fan, you owe it to yourself to at least go check out the paperback version of this and give it a read, because it really does, I think, honor Dungeons and Dragons and the history of the game, and really the sort of interactions that are capable of sitting around a table with a group of friends and doing some role playing, but using the vehicle of Rick and Morty to kind of sell that. And so there's a lot of things that if you've never played D&D, maybe some of the jokes won't hit exactly right, or some of the references won't make complete sense. But I would say if you are not a player of D&D, or you've never really experienced the game, but you're curious about it, this actually might be a good book for you to check out, and just to kind of get an idea about the history of D&D and how the game is constructed, and how obviously there aren't many examples in the book of how people actually sit around a table and play, or sit around like
Right.
Roll20 or something on their computer and try to play. But there are some great examples of how combat works, and how
Yeah.
role playing works, and how the stories could be constructed. So again, I think it is valuable for that audience as well.
Yeah, and the examples are there. If you have Travis and I, we're not experts with D&D. We just started just in the last year,
Right.
and but there are bits and pieces, little bits and pieces that scream, oh yeah, oh that's it right there. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
that is that is something that's happened in our session, for example. And so I think, again, if as you were saying, Travis, if someone is wondering what D&D is like, is has even just a passing curiosity, but they love Rick and Morty, I would recommend this book.
One thing I really like that they do in a few places in this book is like these montage pages where it'll just show them sort of barreling through a campaign, and there's just all these little scenes, but it'll say like challenge rating 2, XP gained 450, skill check, athletics, difficulty 15, failure. Like, so it's just like it's just rolling through all these like very D&D type sayings that are shown with the images to kind of help give you a sense of what they're doing and what those challenges would be, and whether they succeed or fail.
Yep.
But yeah, so I gotta say I'm more of a trade paperback guy in terms of these
You like binging. You like
Rick and Morty
binge
comics.
watching things.
I do, and frankly, I just I don't have any more comic boxes. I gotta stick to some bigger books. But this particular book, it has a lot of great stuff in it to go along with the story. The story itself is great, and the artwork is great. But they also feature a lot of the variant covers at the back of this book, and there are just so many great covers. A lot of great artists came in to do covers. Some of them include characters or monsters from like classic monsters from D&D that don't actually pop up in the story, but make for a great sort of visual encounter on a one-page sheet. There's a lot of great different art styles. Sarah Richard, right? She did a couple of the covers for these, I believe. And
She did. If you were wondering about her, we interviewed her before. Well, I did with a crappy iPhone mic, and that was
but
on
not
a
for
show.
long. We're about to have better mobile recording equipment. Thanks again,
Thanks,
Rode.
my Rode. Yeah. I have a few of her covers. She's a superb artist, drawing those owl bears. Mike Goes Geek, Mike Vasquez. He drew a bunch of variant covers, and he drew my favorite variant cover. And Travis, do you know what my favorite variant cover is?
I would not be so bold as to guess.
I'm gonna show it here on the camera.
Yep, that's fair. I'll give you that.
It's the eye hole man, and he's riding what they call a beholder, which is just a giant ball with a gigantic eye and tentacles with eyes at the end of the tentacles.
Yeah, that's
He says, "Get up out of here with my eye hole."
It's like that low hanging fruit, but it's so juicy and delicious. You just gotta reach out and grab it.
It's so perfect.
Once you turn past all the variant covers, if you really like one of the Smith family's characters, all of their character sheets, which also appeared as variant covers, I believe, for the comics,
Yes.
but they're at least the first page of their character sheets is available, so you can recreate any of these characters for your own campaign. And there's some little bits of cool little information and some things about their flaws or ideals and things like that. There's also a really classic character sheet for Alcazar the Magnificent, which is Rick's classic wizard, level 36, chaotic awesome. So lots of cool stuff in there. But then the reason that I bought this version of the book is the game mod that exists at the very end, Rick and Morty versus D&D, the Temple of Glorb. And I gotta say, Brandon, not exactly what I was expecting.
I sense disappointment in your voice.
Well, now I've skimmed through this. Obviously, we haven't played this quite yet, but I, for some reason, thought that it would somehow be a lot more Rick and Morty related. I almost thought it would be like homebrew style, a Rick and Morty campaign played out through the confines of like a 5e rule set.
Yeah.
But it really leans more towards a traditional just Dungeons and Dragons campaign. There are some unique environments and things like that, but there is very limited reference to Rick and Morty in the campaign itself. And I definitely won't spoil anything if anybody wants to play. I think we may try to play this ourselves in the future. Yeah. But don't expect you to be like jumping through like the Galactic Federation or the Citadel, fighting off the Council of Ricks and rolling your D20 to figure out if you shoot Mr. Poopy Butthole or not. Like that is not the way that the game mod is set up. But again, if you are new to D&D or you've never played before and you think, oh, well, I don't know where to start. Maybe I could get a small campaign or a few friends together to try and play. Really, within this book, there's almost like I'd say 50 to 75% of what you would need to just jump into a game. You could probably use those character sheets from the Rick and Morty characters, and somebody could be so bold as to DM using that game mod, and pick yourself up maybe a player's handbook or just the rules online, and then you're pretty much good to go. Get some dice.
Pretty much good to go. Yeah. The I can on as far as the not being tied to Rick and Morty that much, the mod, I can kind of see that. I can kind of see how they would want to keep it generic enough to where the average, I won't say the average, but a normal D&D player can just take it and be like, okay, cool, let me incorporate this portion into an ongoing campaign or maybe a one shot. But at the same time, you and I run a Rick and Morty podcast, and we would we thought it way back when we first heard that this was going to be a thing in whatever, September, October. We're like, oh, that is cool. That is Rick and Morty campaign. Now I will say this. I will say that I don't do a great Rick and Morty voice, and I'm sure a lot of other people are maybe better or a lot worse than me, and there's potential. People, I'm glad I'm in that way. I'm glad the mod didn't make it Rick and Morty specific.
So you just have a bunch of people doing bad Rick and Morty impressions.
I'm Rick. I'm Rick Sanchez.
Jeez, Rick. You really got us into a tough situation this time.
I'm Mr. Meeseeks. Look at me.
This segment brought to you by Bad Impressions. Well, yeah, I think we covered the gist of this issue. Is there anything sort of that we left out? Anything that you would want to say before we close this one out?
I just want to say the last thing. Shout out to Troy Little, who did the art inside the book itself. Colors by Leonard Ito. The art styles of it, especially when there's the kind of I'll say simulation of the D&D, some of the other Easter eggs as far as dungeon masters and creators are concerned were really good. And just you alluded to the like challenge rating kind of montage-y portions. I thought all that was great, tied with a great story. It's highly recommended. And if you've read the comic, great. Let us know what you thought. To let us know if we're wrong, entirely off base, saying that this is Jerry's best story. Or go read it, go buy it, and then tell us what you thought of it, and then
tell us we're wrong. Yeah.
That's all.
All right. Well, I think that's our first official comprehensive review.
And by the time the next episode of this podcast airs, we'll see if April 1st bring any new episode.
I'm not holding my breath, Brandon.
I'm not either. A coworker came to me today and he said, hey, I looked at my DVR and it said something was going on April 1st. It looked like it was a new episode.
Yeah, because that's how they did it last time. That's how it happened.
You should be the one telling me about this cruise. I'm like, I don't know, man. What do you want from me? Push World Adventures.
Unofficial Rick and Morty podcast. We got to do the legwork out here, right? Anyway, that's it for the main thing. Definitely let us know what you thought of that issue, that book, that printed thing. It is now time for listener suggestions and short outs.
Oh, yeah, we have that segment.
Yeah, it's the last segment that we have. Unfortunately, the one piece of short out suggestion that I put in here, you jammed up into our
Nope.
semi-part news. So again, thank you, Ranma Tushin,
Yeah.
for shouting out the toxic Rick and Morty fans college humor video. Again, check out the link for that. Everybody that supported us or said congrats on the Roadcast thing, big thanks to you guys. And yeah, just thanks to everybody who is continuing to follow us on social media, interact with us. We got a bunch of feedback from folks that won the Symbiote Studios massive Morty giveaway. A lot of you guys are getting those pocket Mortys in the mail. Thanks for sending us those pictures. Thanks for sharing the cool merch that you guys are getting. We really appreciate it. Yeah, it looks so awesome. It's so cool, man.
I have a box of them here. I had them ship me a box because I need to send it out to one more person, and I didn't, like, I'll send it out. You don't need Symbiote. Just send it to me. I'll take care of the legwork. You're just doing so much good stuff. I'll just finish it up. So.
Sweet. Well, I'll give you my address when we're off the air, Brent.
You're getting Roadcast.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Well, anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. Yeah, make sure to we were gonna stream this on Twitch, but unfortunately Twitch was down when we went to start the stream. But you can follow along with this show live as we record it over on Twitch, over on YouTube, even on Mixer. Can you believe it? Mixer? Yeah.
I can't believe it.
But if you are a good old conventional podcast listener, listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever podcatcher you use, if there is a way to rate or review this podcast, we would be so humbled and honored if you would take a few minutes out of your day to give us a rating or review this show if you haven't already. It helps other folks to decide if we're worth listening to or not, and yeah, it helps us with being turn up in search results and things like that. So thank you to everybody that's done that, and yeah, I think that is it for this episode, Brandon.
I think that might be it. I think we should head out, Travis. I think we should head out. I'm Brandon.
I'm Travis. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye.
Bye. That was good. Good exit.
Crushed it every time.
Check them all.